Tom, we're here at Your Amigos Live 2025 in Nashville. Beautiful backdrop. In this video, we're going to talk about antibody drug conjugates, ADCs, development in bladder cancer. You've been intimately involved. Walk us through the big phase 3 trials that are ongoing or planned in this space.
So I need to talk about those studies that are ongoing currently. We're not going to talk about what's already been. We know EV Pembro, we know DV toripalimab. We're parking those.
Park them.
So what trials are currently ongoing? Well, there's two. These are just outside of China. So I'm going to talk about China in a second.
Got you.
So the first one is there is a DV Pembro randomized phase 3 versus Gem-Cis Gem-Carbo. Basically a redo of DV toripalimab, but this is DV Pembro rest of the world trial.
Any reason to think it'll be meaningfully different?
No reason to think it'd be meaningfully different. I think, I don't know.
We'll see.
We don't know, but I'm not going to focus it too much. It's a similar population, HER2, 1, 2, or 3 plus. And then there's a second trial, which is a EV lookalike drug, the bicycle drug. It's a peptide. It's not exactly the same mechanism. It's not exactly the same structure. But again, it's Nectin-4 with MMAE payload. And that's going from a randomized phase 2 dose finding into a randomized phase 3. That's available on clinicaltrials.gov. And that's a dose trial which is also ongoing. So those are the two most mature studies. You might say to me, neither of those are going to be not practice change. None of them are going to be transformative because they're
similar to what we have.
So what is new out there?
What is new out there?
Well,
I might say to you.
We know the sacituzumab govitecan randomized phase 3 didn't work. That's TROP2 with topoisomerase payload. But there are other ones. There's SAC-TMT, but there's also DDXD. And on clinicaltrials.gov, you can find DDXD plus carbo versus Gem-Carbo in those individuals whose cancers have progressed on EV Pembro. So it's technically a second line or perhaps first line post-perioperative EV Pembro of DV plus carbo. Now,
why did they add carbo in it?
Well, I just wonder if you look at the response rates by itself, it looks about 30%. So it doesn't, someone who's 25 and 30. So it doesn't look transformative by itself. Of course, sacituzumab govitecan failed by itself. So it makes a lot of sense to me. The lung cancer folks will tell you that they like SAC-TMT. At ESMO, we saw some SAC-TMT data that was very positive. And I think the linker molecule is important for these agents. So we move away from that, and then we look at another trial that we know is ongoing currently. And in that study, we have a drug called Izabren, which is the HER3, HER1, Topo1 ADC. We saw response rates of a monotherapy of 41%, which looks high, and that's in heavily pretreated patients.
EV-like responses?
But different payload, topo payload. The EV-like responses. And so that has gone by itself, single agent versus Gem-Cis Gem-Carbo, not combining. So that feels ambitious. Post-EV Pembro, but potentially transformative in that, right? So I look at that trial and think, well, that's exciting and that's very positive. So those are the kind of global trials that are ongoing in this space at the moment. Interestingly, there isn't a TDXD trial, because that is the HER2 topoisomerase payload that we know we're using. That's approved in America. There's no confirmatory randomized phase 3 for that. I think that drug's very active, and I would have liked to have seen more with that. And then we haven't seen too many other combination trials at the moment in heavily pretreated patients. There's no re-challenge study. There is one study, it's a randomized phase 2, sacituzumab govitecan plus immune checkpoint inhibition versus chemotherapy. That's a smaller study, investigating. I think Petros leads that trial. And then you go to the rest of the world, it all becomes much grayer. So then you're introducing into this sort of new world. Like, when you go deep into the ocean, you see fish you haven't seen before.
I've not been that deep.
Well, you have to go quite deep, but you do see fish you haven't seen before. You do. I promise. And there you see some new drugs that you wouldn't have heard of before.
So where are we talking about in the world?
So this is exclusively China. So DV toripalimab.
We should mention we have a large Chinese contingent here at our meeting.
Yes, we do.
Many, I'm sure, involved or leading these trials.
And they're going to be talking about some of these trials with us in a minute. And so what have we got here? Well, we've got a Me Too drug that looks like EV with MMAE payload with Nectin-4 targeting. And we also have another drug that looks a bit like dacizumab vedotin, different name, different drug, trastuzumab vedotin, which different. So they're not super exciting. But they're trying to reproduce EV302 and the DV drug in heavily pretreated patients. But there is two drugs which I'm excited about. One is a Nectin-4 topoisomerase 1. Now we know EV's Nectin-4 MMAE, and they're doing a randomized trial versus chemotherapy in heavily pretreated patients, including those who have had drugs like EV before. And then there's an issue around whether or not you can continue to target Nectin-4 but switch the payload. And that's quite exciting for me.
Yeah.
That's one area. Then Isobren, the HER3, HER1, as a single agent, again, is going against chemotherapy, but first line in untreated patients. So you look at China and they're going to be using DV toripalimab. They might be sequencing in the future with Nectin-4 topo-1 ADCs, not drugs like EV, so switching payload and switching target.
Yeah.
And we're using frontline EV pembro, so EV is MMAE Nectin-4, and we're going to switch away from that to other drugs, maybe like HER1, HER2 with topo-1. They're doing it the other way around, which is really interesting.
It sounds to me from the back of the room, as you like to say, that a lot of the next wave of development is different drugs, like you say, different payloads, different linkers, et cetera. But the construct of the trial is not terribly dissimilar. So nobody's going up against EV Pembro with a novel ADC IO. We're not quite to there yet. We're in sort of that second wave of development of this kind of drug.
There is an FGFR3 study. It's a bit off-piste, but that isn't. So EV Pembro versus EV Pembro plus the FGFR3 inhibitor. And that was...
So adding to, but not necessarily
which
EV.
isn't strictly speaking part of this ADC, but there is a randomized trial of EV Pembro plus or minus something.
Yes.
But we haven't seen an SG.
We're not comparing ADCs really. No. Do you think we'll get there? Do we need to get there?
Well, the last thing I would like to talk about before we stop is there was a DAD study in the DADIO trial of SG plus EV with 70% response rates, and now SG plus EV plus Pembro.
Yeah.
And that feels to me, if we are going to be EV Pembro, I think it's going to be those triplets that's going to do it. I think we need to wait and see what the results of that trial is.
Those are small phase 2s.
But there are a number of phase 2s in that, and SAC-TMT is in a triplet as well, and SG's in a triplet.
Phase 2 activity in that ADC combination study, not yet phase 3. But
yeah, and like testis cancer, you've got the doublets, and then you put in bleomycin at the end, and you've got over the lot. So it's possible we'll be using triplets in urothelial cancer. When we say that to the breast cancer doctors, they come back and say you should be sequencing, you shouldn't be combining.
Oh, really?
They also say you should be using biomarkers more. They say you don't take your biomarkers seriously enough. Because they think you should be giving single agent, more personalized therapy. We at the moment in bladder cancer give everything up front and
everything to everybody.
Because we've got such great results, we're thinking maybe we can cure people, and that's why we're doing it.
I think we can. Absolutely. Amazing. A lot of drug development in ADC around the world.